Hello, Marky Dragon, also known as Marcus Eikenberry in real life, and I got Raph Koster with me. You know, he is a guy who is legend in like Ultima Online, all the MMO stuff. I mean, you know, Richard Garriott got a lot of credit for being godfather of the MMO, but I think you were a driving force behind the scenes in a lot of that.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. He's humble. He's humble. And so these days, working on Crowfall, which we're not really going to talk a lot about Crowfall today, but we're in the Crowfall offices.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's one of the projects you're working on. But you were telling me something interesting about board games. And you are kind of exploring board games now. What are you doing in that area?
I've been designing my own original board games, mostly abstract strategy games and card games, actually. I've been having a lot of fun with it. You know, I started out, I went independent, right, after I was at Disney for several years.
I didn't know that.
And, we can walk through the whole history if you want. I did, so I was lead designer on UO, working with Richard and Star and all those folks. And then a group of us left after Privateer Online was canceled. And we ended up eventually becoming the nucleus of Star Wars Galaxies for Sony Online. And so I was creative director for Galaxies, and then they named me chief creative officer for Sony Online. And I did that for a few years, and then I left to go found my own studio. And this was during the web boom and also during the kind of the virtual worlds boom, when not just games, but other kinds of virtual worlds were getting made, you know, the Second Lifes, the Habbo hotels, all of that kind of thing. And so we developed a thing called Metaplace, which was web-based virtual worlds with a toolkit so anybody could make a world and embed it, like put it in an embed on any website. And we made that. There were about 70,000 worlds on it at peak.
70,000?
70,000 worlds, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even with that, we weren't making enough money. And then Facebook gaming happened, and our tech was perfect for it. So we started making Facebook games, which I was optimistic about. I was like, massively multiplayer. Facebook is the largest connected audience on Earth, right?
Yeah. Everybody's already
it should have been awesome. It wasn't. Instead, we got everything that we now associate with Facebook gaming, right? The grinding and the spamming and all of that. But we made a couple of really fun ones. We made Island Life, we made My Vineyard, and then people said, how the hell are you making these games at this polish level so fast? And the answer was the Metaplace technology. So there was a little bit of a bidding war to buy us, and we ended up with Playdom and Disney. So then I was at Disney for a few years where I did mostly like almost internal consulting kind of stuff, working with different teams. So I would really lightly touch a bunch of stuff. So I can't really claim credit for any of it, but helping out randomly on random things ranging from Fantasia to Disney Infinity to a bunch of the Facebook games. And then after that for a while, I went independent, and the thing I tell people is I'm enjoying not being beholden to sociopaths and the business and games and all of that, and just doing what I want for a while. So yeah, making board games has been one of those. I started out making some mobile puzzle games too, and ended up not doing too much of that because mobile market is so ugly.
It's a different beast.
It is. The thing that attracted me to it was you could actually make a game by yourself and launch it and ship it. But the marketing costs are so high. To get noticed even is very hard. So I drifted towards board games, which was, I could do all of those things entirely by myself. So it's not like formally announced or anything, but I'll mention it here anyway. Been working with Boing Boing on the website, a pretty well-known site, on a game for their 25th anniversary. And so we've been working on that and hope to be kickstarting it within this year.
And is that going to be a board game, or is that an electronic game?
It's a card game, actually.
Card game.
It's a card game. I did go ahead and start fiddling around with the idea of maybe we could make a mobile version of this as well. So I have a little prototype down those lines, but the main emphasis is actually a tabletop card game.
So what kind of lessons that you've learned in the the video game realm can you take into a board game design?
Lots.
And where does that benefit? Where does it benefit?
Games are games. So pretty much everything about good game design actually moves over. I guess there's plenty of things obviously around things like real-time play. Graphics isn't really, but
You
that
print
kind of
it once
stuff,
and that's your
technology,
character.
Yeah, that kind of thing isn't really directly relevant. But everything about systems design is very, very relevant. There's lots of that to translate over. So the same kinds of logic that you might put into, I don't know, trying to get a balanced combat system with different roles in it or something like that. That kind of systems thinking translates really well over to a board game. A lot of the Euro-style board games are basically big crafting systems, right? That's basically how they work. Funny enough, even though I'm known for crafting systems and MMOs, I don't actually enjoy a lot of the Euro board games, which is kind of weird. But I found a lot translates over, and probably the most enjoyable thing though is the ease of the feedback loop. How easy it is to start messing around, do something creative, get a prototype up, find a group to just try it out, and that feels great because.
And you're seeing they're right in front of you, and you see them look perplexed. That there's something going on there,
right.
something to smooth out.
Yeah, and you also, when they're having fun, you get to see it immediately too, right? So, you think about all of the barriers that are in the way to get, even a tiny vision for a game into somebody's hands takes a lot of work. It takes months of programming and all of this stuff. So yeah, there's something really cool about the really tight feedback loop there. Board games also has kind of infrastructure around it. Like there's, for example, there are these events called Unpub. Unpubs are where designers come and bring unpublished games.
Oh, okay.
And players show up, and there's like standardized forms where they can give you ratings on things and everything. So there's actually like a whole culture and community of designers get together, show off unfinished work, get feedback from other people, that kind of thing. We've actually got, I live in San Diego, and we've got a nice little designer meetup that happens. We're doing it more than monthly now, but a couple of really good games have come out of that and gotten published. Probably the most visible, Tim Fowers did Paperback and Burgle Brothers, coming out of, he was a member of our workshop. He recently moved, but he had been doing video game work, and now he's doing board games full time because of board game success.
Interesting. What is there anything that if you were not beholden to resources, meaning your time or money or whatever, that you could take that you've learned in the video game world and put it into one of your board games to make it the most spectacular thing, something new and innovative we've never seen before? Where could you go with that?
In board games?
Yeah.
Candidly, board games is a much more innovative space than video games is.
Okay.
I actually think it's way more likely that ideas would flow the other direction.
They'd flow the other direction?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's reverse that then. So you've been making board games and you've learned all this stuff. What with no restriction on time or money or whatever, from the board games, what would just blow everybody's mind? What would go out there that would be the next big thing that nobody'd understand, but afterwards they go, holy shit, that was awesome.
Yeah, I think it's probably easiest to talk almost by like analogy or examples, right? Like I think a lot of your viewers know MMOs, right?
Yeah.
So, in MMOs, we really often settle for individual systems that aren't necessarily fun on there. They don't stand on their own as a game. Like if you took that system, plucked it out, and dropped it into a standalone game of its own, you'd go, it's just okay. I wouldn't play this by itself, right? It's supported by all of the social connections. It's supported by interactions with other systems, that kind of thing. Board games because they're cheap to develop, they allow more innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're cheap to develop, though, there's also like lots of new ideas competing. And so an idea actually has to be pretty solid, and it has to be fun on its own pretty much immediately, or it's going to fail, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There aren't a lot of grindy games, for example, in board gaming.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they don't tend to survive. As long as the people don't design them, they don't last, right? You know, a game that, if you make a board game that actually gets picked up and people play it for 10 years, it's a serious classic.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're in an environment like that, it gives you a very different bar for what a game system needs to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it also, because board games are very transparent about how they work, right? You can see everything, so you can see how they work. There's sites like Board Game Geek that deconstruct everything about a board game. So, you know, in video games, there's been all this wrangling for years now about, can there be a science of game design? Can we figure out, you know, the underlying grammar? What is a game? And, you know, Board Game Geek, like, has, like, schema. They've got, like, tables of, oh, so this one is an auction-based game using a push-your-luck mechanic, and, you know, they've got it all deconstructed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the interesting thing is that a huge amount of that actually translates back. So probably the biggest thing that I think I would be bringing back is a lot less tolerance for an individual game system not being fun in its own right. Most board games are really small in scope,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so it forces you to be elegant. I think, you know, when I think back now to so many of the things that I put into, you know, if we go back to something like I wrote the fishing in UO way back when.
I love fishing.
It was just a, you know, it's a slot machine, right?
I want Crowfall to have fishing. Just saying.
Yeah. But it was literally like a slot machine, right? It was like, here's a table of stuff you can pull up. Here's a bunch of funny messages, right? Yeah, that was about it. If I were approaching it today, I'd go, well, how, you know, if you made a board game that was just, like, literally picture it, the board game equivalent would be, here's a set of cards, they all have different things on them, you shuffle it and you draw one.
Right, and that's what you've won.
And you go, you know, when you put it in that light, it's like, wait a minute, all of a
It's
sudden you don't
boring.
love fishing anymore, right?
Right.
Right?
You have to have a use for your winnings.
There has to be some more to it, right? But it's fairly easy to see that, like, if somebody said, I want to make a super simple card game about fishing, like, really simple, and all you get is a deck of cards and we have nothing else. And it's like, oh, okay. It's really easy to picture, oh, well, maybe we have 3 decks of cards, and maybe we have a little pile of bait. And then I wager the worm on shallow versus medium versus deep. Now I got to manage these. Shallow has a higher odds at paying me back with things I could use as bait in the higher ones. But the payoff is multiplied by how, you know, so, you know, do I take a cheap worm and put it and draw one of the expensive cards, low odds of success, but I might get something really cool. If I put it here, I might get more worms. I've got 3 worms. How do I allocate? How do I balance, get through, and try to keep the bait pool alive as long as I, right? All of a sudden, this is now a game, right?
Yeah.
This is a way more interesting game.
Mm-hmm.
And the implementation difference between this and fishing in most MMOs is on the order of a couple hours difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really small. It's still really tight. It's really small, really elegant. And I just made that up on the fly, right? So I think that's the kind of the design discipline, I guess, that moving into that board game realm, you know, you could bring back
Mm-hmm.
and say, wow, we don't have
Yeah.
to settle as much. We actually can come up with really elegant ways to do things. So
One with the most loot wins.
yeah, so I'd probably bring some of that kind of thing back,
Yeah,
right? There's
that's
a
really
lot to
interesting.
lot to learn from over on that side.
I really love taking outside influences and forcing them into something because it makes you think about things different.
Yes.
And that's a really powerful tool.
Yeah, I actually think it's most powerful if you go outside of games altogether. So I've been doing a couple of things. I am absolutely terrible at plants. Okay, plants. I kill so many plants. Really not good at it. And we have a house now with a nice yard and stuff, so I've been trying to grow some strawberries and some herbs. Nothing too fancy, right? And I finally got it where the herbs, they pretty much grow themselves. I don't have to do anything. Strawberries, I just need to remember to water them. But other things, I'm just failing at. And one day I realized, wow, this is like this complicated video game system with a shitty UI. Like, I can't tell why I just lost all my lettuce. I don't know. Is it too wet? Is it too dry? Not enough potassium? Not enough nitrogen? There's all these variables that in a video game, these would all be convenient like stat bars or something, right? And the UI is terrible. And it's really slow. One of the things that video games have taught us is if you want to keep players engaged, you have to like give them positive feedback like every 10 seconds or something. Tell them, yeah, you're doing this right. You know, and then they learn and they get better at it. And I found gardening just impenetrable, right? Even though, like, people have written freaking almanacs, the entire cheat guide is out there, right? That's what an almanac is. It's like, here's your cheat guide. But I've found some success for the last, it's been 20 years now. I've been keeping fish, aquariums. And about, when did I start trying? 6 or 7 years ago, I started trying aquarium plants.
Which make for a beautiful tank.
Yeah, I'll show you pictures. My tank is gorgeous.
I really enjoyed doing that.
Yeah. So, this won't be
family photos inbound.
Well, not even family, just fish tank photos inbound, I'm afraid. But yeah, the thing is that the fish tanks, of course, already have a complicated video game of their own. Right? So that's an 80-gallon planted tank.
Camera?
Yeah. Let's see if you can see that out there in the
80
room.
gallons, that's a good size.
It's a good size. And you know, one of the interesting things that of course I learned is that the smaller tanks are actually harder, which was not intuitive.
Oh yeah, because yes, I know, because the changes are affected at a much
I know it tips over more readily.
Yes,
right?
yes, you can imbalance it real easily.
Right,
yes.
The percentage change in some random chemical in the tank is a larger percentage, right? So I started keeping the plants, and when you start out, it's like a video game. It's like, this aquarium is a video game with bad UI. Like, the UI for measuring health, there's like 3 bars you need to worry about.
This seems like the ultimate geeky statement.
I know, right?
My aquarium has a bad UI.
Right. But you take the aquarium and you start out and they tell you, okay, you get 1 inch of fish per gallon of water. And that's actually a rule of thumb that's wrong, but it's good for when you start out. And then they tell you, you've got to cycle the tank. And cycling the tank means measure the ammonia and make sure it's not too high. And once your ammonia and your nitrates are right, then you can put in fish. And then they tell you, and some fish like this pH, and some like this other pH. How do you move the pH, right? And so you gradually start learning, and these are almost like spells you can throw at the aquarium in order to move these stats, right? When the stats are right, the fish are happy. And then you have to pick the right fish. And then some of them die, and you try to figure out why. It's like, well, some stat went out of whack, right? Then you learn more and gradually start figuring out, oh, well, I have nitrate, nitrite, ammonia, pH. And when you buy a standard test kit, they'll give you like 4 things, 4 colored bars for you to watch. And the method for looking at the bar is terrible. Like, scoop out some water and add drops of this and then shake and then wait for 5 minutes. And
see what color it is.
Right, and then hold it up to a chart and go, is that blue or not? I can't tell, you know, it's terrible. But at least, you know, you get there and it's like, oh, well, this is only 4 bars. Like, for a video gamer, that's not that much to juggle. 4 is okay. Then I get to plants, and I'm like, whoa, because you still have to make the fish game work. You're still juggling those 4 bars.
Right.
You put in a plant. Turns out the plant, there's light, CO2,
right,
3 different major chemicals for food, N, P, and K, so nitrogen, potassium, and phosphates. Plus, there are vitamins, which are like additional trace elements. And every plant has a different need on all of these. and they all have a complicated relationship with one another. If you increase the light, then that's like hitting the gas. But if they didn't get enough food, they can't take advantage. But algae doesn't need food, so turn up the light without turning up the food, and your tank is eaten by algae, which kills the fish too.
Well, you just need algae-eating fish.
Well, and you can do that, but it's kind of a stopgap actually, because it means something's out of whack and you're patching it on the side with the fish, right? So if you want it to actually be right, you want to have minimal algae, enough to feed those fish, not enough that it runs wild. But then it turns out the other kind of thing that they need besides food is CO2. But if CO2 levels get too high in the tank, that will kill the fish.
Right.
And if you put in the plants, then their need for CO2 changes from day to night, because plants absorb oxygen during one moment and exhale CO2 during the other, whatever. If you add the CO2 bubbler thing,
right,
that changes the pH of the tank. So all of a sudden you're back over on the other side playing the other game again. Now you're spinning all these extra plates, right? And I'm like, this is totally a video game, right? You could make a really cool, like, and it doesn't need to be skinned as fish. Like if you just took this game system that I just described, changed the names of all the variables and said, oh, you're managing a planet's ecology, or you're, you know, whatever, or if it's a crafting system
you
or something.
apply it to all these other things.
It's a rich, complex system that nature is designed for you that you could just use, right? So that's a really roundabout way of saying the world is full of really cool game inspirations, right? That you could look at and go, that would actually be a really fun thing to play with. And then it just needs ported over.
You know, and I totally imagine with you talking about this and saying, you know, relating it back to video games and everything. I worked with a guy that did a study on pets, and what they found was the most sought after information on pets was not about cats or dogs. It was about guinea pigs. It was totally underserved. And you know, fish are pets as well.
Yeah.
And I could totally see some sort of game like this, learn how to build your awesome fish tank or whatever, and it be this game and say, okay, you've reached level so and so, go out and buy your tank. You know?
Yeah. It's funny because there's tons of aquarium software out there.
Oh, I didn't know that. I've never looked. I always just.
And none of it is about this.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's all about buying pretty collections of fish and running them around in a screensaver.
Well,
there's tons and tons of it because the game is hard.
You know,
so
this fishing could totally be the screensaver when you're not playing it too.
It could.
And you see all your fish dying, and you go, oh shit, I got to play the game more.
So the crazy thing is, actually, it's funny. This also speaks to the limitations of science in a way, right? So humans have been fish keeping in aquariums for hundreds of years, right? You'd think that we would actually understand all of the way that game works, right? All the stuff I just described.
Well, we've had it around long enough, yeah.
But we don't.
Yeah.
Would you believe it's literally just not been studied by biologists? They just don't study fish tanks. And
oh yeah, because
it's just one of those weird things. So a bunch of the things that have it's actually really weird. If you go look at the fish keeping hobby or whatever, people will tell you, oh well, the way to get a beautiful fish tank, you know, there's this guy in Japan, Takeshi Amano, who discovered you could keep shrimp. And if you go to a pet store these days, you'll see that they sell shrimp in the fish tanks now. That's only like a last 20 years invention, where people said, you know, those kinds of shrimp eat algae. And if you set up your tank this way, with these parameters and these plants, you can put shrimp in them, and it'll be perfect and beautiful.
And you can sit there and watch them go like this.
Yeah.
Because that's what
that's
grab
what they
their
do.
hands
Grab,
and, pull it to their.
Another person, a woman named Diane Wallstead, said, I don't understand. We keep trying to solve all of these problems with fish tanks. When I go out and I look at our pond, which has dirt at the bottom of it, everything is fine. So she did experiments and she set up tanks with dirt on the bottom, which everybody's always said, don't do that. It's too much. And she takes tanks, fills them with dirt, puts plants in them, and puts them sitting in the windowsill in the sun. And they work. And so now there's this thing called the Wallstad method, right? And then there's a third guy named Tom Barr who looked at fish tanks and he went, you know, I don't know, the guy must have tons of money or tons of space or both or something. He set up like 100 tanks in parallel and actually ran experiments and said, what happens if I just overdo nitrogen? What if I overdo this, overdo that? And he ended up coming up with this method that said, you know, you can just put in too much food of everything, just like go nuts, go way over the top. The fish won't even notice it. The plants will be happy, and you will have no algae. All accepted wisdom had been put in too much food, you get algae, and he proved them wrong. And so, bizarrely, these three hobbyist people, right, completely upended our science of marine biology, right, because they wanted to keep clean fish tanks.
Yeah.
You know, when
because that's always been the thing. I mean, you know, you get the algae on the glass, and then
yeah,
you know, it clouds everything, and you're like,
yeah, the whole
it's all wrong.
Green. Yeah. It wasn't. I mean, when I was a kid, the standard advice was every few weeks you have to drain your tank, wash the gravel.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's heresy now. It's like, what are you doing?
I never did that when I had tanks.
Well, it's also too much work. But,
yeah,
you know, now it's like, no, but you need a thriving bacteria bed. You need, you know, all this stuff, right? It's just amazing to me that here's this thing that is in like houses everywhere, and nobody actually knew how it worked.
That's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So yeah, a video game would be a good thing.
Yeah, I could totally see it, and I could totally see it being for sale in all the pet shops.
Yeah.
And, you know,
even
online.
better would be that at some point somebody comes up with a nice electronic way to measure all this stuff.
Oh shit!
And then you put the actual
or a PC plug-in. You know, here's your USB, and this will measure the stuff for you. Are you winning your game?
That's right. This stuff is coming faster than people expect, I think.
That is the ultimate in gamification of something.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, it's actually, you know, gamification is usually about slapping points on stuff, right? People call it pointsification. And you know, in the game design field, we're pretty dismissive of that. We're like, that's crap. Because what you really want to do to truly gamify something is, it needs to have that rich, cool system behind it that's explorable, where you can learn all of that. But, you know, gardening has it already. Fish tanks has it already. All of these things already have those systems. What they really need is a good UI, because the UI is terrible. Yeah,
amazing. So, Raph, if people wanted to find you, where do they find you?
RaphKoster.com.
Easy enough.
Easy enough, yeah.
Yeah, so... Well, that's been excellent. Thank you for your time.
Sure thing. And, this was a blast.
Yeah, this went totally someplace I never even imagined, but that's awesome.
Hope we didn't lose you along the way.
Yeah. So, you know, everybody get your fish tanks ready. Hey, thanks, Raph.
Awesome. Yeah.